It's Shay Styles, where we bring our creativity to life.
Do you have a sweater that needs some revamping, livening up? Well, follow this tutorial. Check out what I did. So to start off, we're going to cut the side seams. I actually use my seam ripper instead to remove the side seam so that both sides of the garment are equal. After removing that, I needed to pin off to determine how much I wanted the sweater to come in. So I did that on both sides and put a pin there. And then I used my curved ruler to trace out how much I actually needed to remove. Then putting the garment back on me, I wanted to trace out the underwire of my bra so that I could determine where I needed to cut the actual sweater. So here I go, tracing, and then I take it off and trace it again just so it's very clear where my marks need to go, and I need to make sure that I connect it to the side where I am cutting, taking in the fabric. So once we do that, we then need to cut our garment, cut our sweater. So you're going to take the sweater, and we just want to work with the front of the garment. So fold it in half neatly so that we are only working with the front part of the sweater. You're going to take your scissor, and my seam allowance is 1/2 inch, so I cut 1/2 inch from my marking lines that I made on the sweater all the way around. So if you want your seam allowance to be smaller or larger, then make sure you cut that difference. Now, then the side seam, I need to make sure that I cut that distance away so that it's a fitted sweater because it was pretty loose before. So I'm going to cut straight up to the mark where I am taking in the sweater. Perfect. So this is what we have now, and we're going to take our bottom part of the sweater with right sides facing, and we're going to pin everything in place so that we can sew it. Now I want you to take note that we are losing now 1 inch of the sweater because of our seam allowance. Well, if your seam allowance is 1/2 inch, then you're going to be losing 1 inch of the sweater. So 1/2 inch goes to the top of the garment, 1/2 inch goes to the bottom of the garment to compensate for the seam allowance. And so we're going to make those adjustments to the back of the sweater once we assemble the front. So make sure that you pin both sides of the front of the garment so that you can sew across. So I did one bust line, and now you're going to go and do the same thing for the other. Now take your garment to the sewing machine, and whatever your seam allowance is, mine is 1/2 inch, you're going to sew the bust line together, right sides facing. Then you're going to press it flat, press it nice and flat on both sides. And now you're going to top stitch down that seam allowance. So I did like 1/4 inch from the seam line, and now this is what your garment should look like. The front of the garment should be done, and you see now that the back is 1 inch longer than the front. If you want to keep it like that, that's totally up to you, but I wanted it to be equal all around. So what I need to do now is I need to fold up 1 inch, and then I'm going to sew that inch so that the front of the garment is equal to the back of the garment. So now that both sides are equal, the front and the back of the garment are the same length, we're going to turn the sweater inside out so that right sides of the garment are facing each other, and then we're going to sew the side seams. I like to sew the side seam starting from the underarm, working my way down to the bottom. So I'd suggest you do the same as well. So I'll start off at the corner, underneath the underarm where the opening is, and then slightly move the fabric until I get to my seam allowance, which for me is a 1/2 inch.
Hey yo, Wayne, this is dope.
Thanks for watching.